Hello everyone. Culture. Dubai has a diversified, bright culture. One of the things that made me move here in the first place. But there's a little bit of problem with the diversified culture or any culture. New cultures, yeah? So have you ever been shocked by culture? Shocked by culture? I'm not talking about a scary movie. Shocked by culture. Well, it's a term rarely considered, a term rarely known to people. Cultural shock is an experience, or it's a feeling, a state where you get in, particularly when you move to a new culture. This feeling could be bad and could be good. There are different ways people get affected by it. But what is a cultural shock? Well, a cultural shock is, as I said, is an experience. So when you go from one culture to another one, you might not like it, right? It might be too difficult for you to adapt it. It might be, how you say, too shocking for you. Simple. So suppose you move to another country, or even within the country you move to a different city. You get a cultural shock in a way of new language, new people, they dress differently, they eat differently, the transportation, the roads and traffic is different, the way they deal certain situations is different, the way they live is different, public hygiene, everything is different. And then you get into a state where you are shocked, and that shocked state is a cultural shock actually. I grew up with my grandfather. He was retired when I was young, retired from the foreign services. He had traveled almost the half the world, or maybe more than that. So I grew up looking at him, learning from him. There's a lot I learned from him, and one of the best things that I ever learned from him was how to adapt to different cultures, because he talked about different cultures, how people live in different countries and different cultures. And I thought, well, I'm ready. So soon after school, when I had to go to a college, I left home. I'm talking about when I was 16, right? So since 16, I've been outside my comfort zone, my home. I've been away from my family. I had been near to them time to time, let's say in a different city. Right now I'm in a different country, so it's a totally different situation. But I thought I'm ready, but when I moved to these other places time to time, when I lived with different people, it was a shock. And the weirdest thing was I never really noticed that I'm in a shock. I thought it is something else. I thought maybe I'm not a good person. At times I was doubting myself. At times I was thinking, oh, this place is just such a turnoff, it's a place of negativity. But then how could a place be a negativity where okay, I'm not progressing, but there's, millions of people progressing. There's a lot of people who are happy in the same place that I am not happy at. So it was a bit of a confusion. And to get over with this confusion, I tried different things. I tried going on, like a hunt for a new place where I can be at peace. I tried different new places and different new things, but it never really worked out. And the misery is, it took me a really long time to find out that it was a cultural shock, rather than, I was blaming people, I was blaming myself, but it actually was a cultural shock. So let's talk about the cultural shock in steps. So there are four major steps of a cultural shock that you go through. The first one is the honeymoon stage. Now in the honeymoon stage, as every honeymoon is starts really good, and it's really fun. So people, when they move to a new country, suppose, or a new city, to all these new things and all these new people, they look at it as a romantic light. They think of it as something nice because they're excited to explore. They feel good when they speak to the locals. They feel good when they see how the locals are dressing different than them. They're excited about the new food, how it tastes, the flavors and everything. A lot of different things. So they go through like a honeymoon stage where they're really happy with the new place that they've moved to. But what happens is that as every honeymoon, it fades away and ultimately it ends. And what happens when it really ends? Well, you enter into a stage of negotiation. Now, it might take you a few months, from a month, or maybe even takes you a year. I mean, I had been to places where I was living for a few years, and my honeymoon stage lasted, I don't know, a year maybe. But it ends, and then you enter the negotiation stage. And what happens in the negotiation stage is that you start seeing things differently. The love is over. The food that was tasty tastes alien food because you're not used to it, and then you suddenly start missing your hometown and the food over there. And the people that you love talking to and interacting to, all those new people, they suddenly start feeling strange, and you get offended because nobody speaks your language. And you look at the way they dress up, or the way they eat, or the way they live, and the way they drive, and everything is, you feel like a shock. I mean, it's weird for you. And then there's a rush, there's a feeling that you just want to run away to your hometown. You feel like you don't belong there. And there's many different things that this feeling accompanies, and you get bored, you feel lonely, people get into depression, anxiety, oversleep, excessive cleaning, they get irritated by people, they get into fights very oftenly, your decisions are no more sound, you don't enjoy. And it could be a lot of things, because you're dependent on something, and that dependence was your comfort zone, and now you don't see your comfort zone anymore. So you could be like in a job, and you're no more enjoying your job, or you could be like studying like students. There's a lot of educational exchange these days, and people go to other countries for semester abroad, or for years, even for a whole degree or something. And you just can't take it anymore. And this stage is, it pushes you to the edge. It makes you do things that you didn't do before. You engage with people who are not good for you. You make false friends because you're running away. You just need a shoulder to cry. You start excessive exercising, which is not good. I have done that once in a city. It is not really good. A lot of different things happen to you, and all these different things are not really good things that you're doing to yourself. You might harm yourself. Wastage of time is a major thing that happens in this phase. So yeah, it's a tough stage. It's the toughest in the levels, in the steps of cultural shock. But then again, you gotta get over with that. You gotta learn how to go out of it. You either run away or whatever. So then comes the third stage. So from honeymoon, you got into negotiation, the bad one. And now there's a third stage called the adjustment, because now, let's say you can't run away, or let's say you were not there for just a semester, 6 months. Let's say you have to be there for a few years for your degree, or you're married to a person who lives there, and or I don't know, like you didn't like your country maybe, or the things were not right for you, so you left. So in that case, you have to live there. So you enter the third stage, which is adjustment. Now you start adjusting. And this is natural, actually. You don't really get to decide. So again, negotiation can take like a few months to a year, something like that. And you start adjusting. You take those good things from this culture. For example, let's say I'm in Dubai. And before this, I was in Pakistan. And the food in the cities was really spicy. But here in Dubai, the local food is not so spicy, and I like it. It's simple. Although it's good, so it makes you eat a lot, which is not a good thing. But what I'm trying to say is that you get things, you choose things. Okay, I like this, I like that. So you start adjusting. Sometimes you like the culture of how the people dress, let's say. Sometimes you like the people, how they think, and how they treat others. Sometimes you like, the day-to-day stuff, like, for example, how the roads are, and how good and how comfortable the train is, or how cheap stuff is, how economical it is, how accessible stuff is. For example, here in Dubai, everything is so accessible. I mean, I can order a nice hot pizza at like 3 in the night. I can order McDonald's, I can order anything, right? So you start adjusting to things. And usually what happens is, there's a thing that goes into background, which there's an ability that you have. You might have it or you don't have it, and it is called a cross-cultural compound. Now, what is this ability? This ability is your efficiency, or your, how do you say, simple, your capability of getting used to and adjusting to like new cultures or diversified cultures, or a simpler one or a more complicated one. So basically, if you have a better cross-cultural compound, it means you can better deal with new cultures, and you will have less problems than the person who has a lesser cultural, cross-cultural compound. And so some people have it like, as in, I just started this thing with, I was brought up by my grandfather, and he was a person who had been around the world. My parents had lived in Europe, and they had lived in some Arab countries as well. So there was some input from there as well. And my father's entire family was in Europe. So they were coming every year, and I was looking at it, and so I had a good cross-cultural compound, but even then it affected me. I can say that the places that I chose were not really good, but I can also say that it was my fault, and maybe I thought that I have, the ability to get used to it, but I did not have. So it takes some time to adjust. Some people, there are like literally 3 types of adjustments that you do. Some people get totally adjusted; they get totally used to the new culture, and they just leave their home country. They never want to go back. Let's say, according to data, 10% of expatriates, they just go to a new country and they just stay there. They never come back. And there's a second type of people as well. These are the people who just run away. They can't take it. They can't take it. They try hard, but they can't take it. So what happens is these people, they just go back. They just go home, or like what I did back in the time. I left one city and I left for another one, and I didn't like it, so I left for another one. So there are people, who run away. I was one of them, and there's a third type of people, a third type of adjustment, and these are the people who you call, you can use the term cosmopolitan. So these people are, they adjust in a way that they have no problem living here, and they have no problem going back or going to some other place. So what they have is they have a strong cross-cultural compound, and they get used to it. They adapt all the good things from one culture, and they still remember their their codes and values from their last culture. Like I said, those people who completely get used to the new one, they kind of forget their original cultures. I'm not judging them, I'm just explaining the type of people. And so there are 3 types of adjustments. And after this whole thing, the third thing, the 4th step is adoption. I think I already explained the 4th step actually, because the 3 types of adjustments, when you do that, you're basically adopted. So again, you either adapt to it, or you either run away, or things like that happen. So it took me, let's say, 10 years to realize that all this time when I was, let's say, irritated, or I was angry, or I wasn't productive actually, this whole time what was happening was that I was going through a cultural shock. Now it took me 10 years, and I wish somebody had told me in the first year or so that there is a thing called cultural shock, and life would have been much easier. I would have, studied about it. I know there have been a lot of people telling me, hold on, you'll be good, you'll get used to it. But, I believe that knowing the exact phenomenon that happens, the cultural shock, if I knew this, life would have been much easier. I think right now I'm also going through a bit of a cultural shock in Dubai. There are many things that you can observe and which can indicate that you're going through a cultural shock. For example, a lot of sleep. For example, irritation, as I said, getting into fights, a feeling of loneliness, anxiety, isolation. You're just locking yourself in a ghetto. And one funny thing, extreme cleanliness is also an indication. So I think on average I wash my hands, 35 times a day with soap. I wash them so much that I have to use some Vaseline on it to save my skin. And I think that is one indication that I'm in a cultural shock. Now let's see if how is my negotiation stage, if how long it is. Usually it's not long enough and I run away. But this time I'm determined. Let's see how we take it, and let's see how I adjust. Which category of adjustment do I fall in? I think I would never forget my origin. I love my country. I love my people. I had lived for 7 to 8 years in the capital of Pakistan, Islamabad. I love that place. If I could, I would go there every week. So I would not forget it, but let's see if I can adapt the good things in there. I'm getting along pretty well, but let's see. There is a lot of things to get adjusted to. And later I will make another video on how is the reverse of this whole thing, on how do you go back, and or what is the next step, how do you go to another place, or when to determine and everything. But for now, just find out if you have moved to another place within the country or anywhere in the world, or if you're planning to, just make sure you take the cultural shock phenomenon into consideration. Try to develop a good cross-cultural compound, because this can give you an edge over the other people. If you are good to adopt diversified and new cultures and new places and new languages, you can have an edge in other countries with just living a good life, with finding good work, starting a good business, a lot of different things. So good luck. You are gonna get a cultural shock, but I hope it's less, and I hope it goes easy on you. So have a safe journey.